The town of George Washington, only about 23 miles away from Ephrata, but Ephrata is where there is actually a direct link to our country's first president. And you'll find it in an old house that is now used for special gatherings. Deis has the story on the rich history inside the Nat Washington House.
Directly across the street from the Grant County Courthouse in Ephrata sits this Sears and Roebuck house built in 1910.
There's just a tremendous amount of history and knowledge that is contained in this house.
It's called the Nat Washington House, named after the former state senator.
He basically lived almost his whole life right here in this house.
Mike Selleck bought the house from Nat's sons, young Nat and Tom, 2.5 years ago.
I mean, we had no idea that anybody would have an interest in the house because it was my dad's house.
And since then, Mike has spent thousands of dollars restoring it.
I can't believe he's done all the things that he's done. It's just amazing.
And countless nights and weekends being awed by the history within these walls.
My 9th grade history teacher would roll over dead and roll over in his coffin if he knew that I was here talking about history. But when I got involved in the house, it just sucked me right in.
You see, George Washington, our country's first president, is actually Senator Nat's 5th great uncle.
This is George's nephew. This is Bushrod Washington. He inherited Mount Vernon from George Washington.
The original picture of Bushrod is now in the Smithsonian, but it hung in this exact spot for decades. After the Civil War, this Bushrod moved his family from West Virginia.
They came out to be orchardists. They read about all these apples out here.
They first arrived in Spokane before eventually homesteading right at where Grand Coulee Dam now sits. But they found life in Washington much tougher than their life in West Virginia.
It's sagebrush and it's very harsh. And how do I make a living without 100 and some slaves? We got to do this ourselves.
Bushrod's son Nathaniel was the first president of the Grand Coulee Dam administration.
1920, he went down to San Francisco and he lobbied for the Grand Coulee Dam.
While there, he met a future president named Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And somehow, through all their travels, the Washington family preserved artifacts from as far back as 1662.
It was all brought out from West Virginia, and it was kept in this little corner over here for in a lock and key that Nat Washington had.
Among the artifacts, pieces of George Washington's coffin. His Gunter scale and his compass were also kept here, right in this house in Ephrata.
This is what George used when he was in his early teens to survey all the land around West Virginia.
Dozens of items like these were sold for thousands of dollars at a heritage auction 2 years ago. But the history remains with the house. And with thousands of archives hanging on the walls or in boxes in the basement, Selleck knows there's so much more to find.
There's still, I feel, 10 more years of pulling things out and discovering all the rich history and of this house and having the time and then sharing it with the community, sharing it with everybody.
Tom Washington was flooded with emotion seeing the new version of his old house for the first time.
It was just an amazing experience. I just can't describe what it has meant to our family, what Mike has done.
And that's what's most important to Selleck, preserving a family's legacy that goes all the way back to the father of our country.
It's not a responsibility, it's in my heart and it will always be there.
In Ephrata, I'm Deis, KXOI4 HD News.